There are moments when time feels solid, like a river you can measure, count, divide into neat seconds and minutes. And then there are moments when time quietly betrays you, stretching, shrinking, or stopping altogether. Not because the world changed, but because your brain did. And chronostasis is one of the simplest, strangest clues that time is not something you perceive directly, but something your mind actively constructs, edits, and occasionally freezes without asking for permission, like when you glance at a clock and the second hand appears to hesitate, lingering too long on a single tick before resuming its march. A sensation so common that most people barely question it, yet so profound that it reveals a hidden truth. Your experience of time is not a live broadcast, it's a carefully stitched replay assembled after the fact. Chronostasis happens in the tiny gap between one moment and the next, during a rapid eye movement called a saccade, when your eyes jump from one point to another, and during that jump, your brain briefly shuts down visual processing to prevent motion blur, creating a short blind spot in your perception, a fraction of a second where nothing is actually seen. And instead of allowing you to notice this gap, instead of letting reality feel broken or discontinuous, your brain performs a quiet trick. It fills in the missing time by extending the first image you see after the eye movement, stretching it backward to cover the gap, giving you the illusion that the second hand stayed still longer than it really did. That time paused, when in fact your brain simply rewrote the timeline to keep your experience smooth and uninterrupted. This matters more than it seems, because chronostasis is not about clocks, it's about how the brain treats time itself, not as a continuous flow you passively observe, but as a mental model constantly being adjusted, corrected, and retroactively edited to maintain coherence. And this means that your sense of now is always slightly delayed, always reconstructed, always an interpretation rather than a direct window into reality, and yet it feels immediate, precise, unquestionable, which is exactly why it's so easy to forget that time, as you experience it, is not the same thing as time as it exists. The brain does not measure time like a stopwatch. It infers time from change, from motion, from memory, from attention, from expectation, and when those signals momentarily misalign, as they do during rapid eye movements, the brain does not alert you to the inconsistency, it hides it, because its primary job is not truth, but continuity, not accuracy, but survival. And a world that constantly flickers, skips, and resets would be far more dangerous than one where small errors are quietly smoothed over. Chronostasis reveals that what you call the present moment is not a razor-thin slice of reality, but a flexible window, stretched and compressed depending on context, attention, and neural timing. And this flexibility becomes even more apparent when you notice that chronostasis doesn't only happen with clocks. It can happen with sounds, with movement, with sudden changes, with moments of surprise where time seems to slow just enough for you to react, because the brain, when startled, increases the density of information it records, making moments feel longer in retrospect, not because they lasted longer, but because they contained more data. This is the deeper layer of the illusion. Time doesn't slow down, memory speeds up, attention sharpens, perception becomes granular, and afterward, when the brain reviews what happened, the moment feels stretched, expanded, elongated, like a slow-motion replay that never actually occurred in real time, only in the way it was processed, stored, and recalled. And chronostasis is simply the cleanest, most visible version of this process, a tiny tear in the illusion where the editing becomes noticeable. What makes this even more unsettling is that chronostasis shows us the brain is willing to rewrite the immediate past. Not distant memories, not childhood recollections, but the last half second of experience. Without your awareness, without consent, without leaving a trace, which means that the line between perception and memory is thinner than we like to believe, almost non-existent, and that the present moment you feel so confident in is already a memory by the time you notice it, already shaped, already assembled. And yet, despite this, you trust your sense of time completely because it feels stable, reliable, objective. Seconds pass, minutes accumulate, days unfold. but chronostasis quietly suggests that this stability is an illusion maintained by constant neural labor, and that when the brain's timing mechanisms drift even slightly, your experience of time can stretch, pause, or blur, not because the universe changed, but because the brain's internal clock momentarily slipped. This internal clock is not a single structure or mechanism, it's a distributed process spread across multiple brain regions involving attention, movement, memory, expectation, and sensory integration. And when these systems fall out of sync, even briefly, time perception becomes elastic, subjective, unreliable. And chronostasis is the proof that this elasticity exists even in ordinary everyday life, even when you feel fully awake, fully present, fully in control. The reason this matters for understanding sleep paralysis, which we will move towards slowly, carefully, is that chronostasis shows us something crucial. That consciousness can be awake and alert while time perception is temporarily distorted, that awareness can persist even when the brain's usual coordination systems are lagging behind, and that this mismatch does not require anything dramatic or pathological, only a brief desynchronization between perception and processing. Chronostasis is not a malfunction, it's a feature, a protective edit designed to keep your experience seamless, but it also reveals the fragility of that seamlessness, the fact that your experience of reality depends on dozens of timing processes working in harmony, and when they don't, the illusion thins and you glimpse the machinery underneath. What you glimpse is not chaos, it's construction. The brain builds time the way it builds color, depth, and motion, through inference, prediction, and correction. And when something interrupts that process, even for a split second, the brain doesn't panic. It compensates, sometimes by freezing the world just long enough for you not to notice the gap, and sometimes by stretching moments so they feel longer than they are. And these compensations are so smooth, so automatic, that they usually go unnoticed, except in moments like chronostasis, where the trick briefly reveals itself. And here is the quiet, unsettling implication. If the brain can stretch a moment backward to hide missing time, if it can pause the world to cover a perceptual blind spot, then your experience of time is not anchored to the external world. It is anchored to internal synchronization, to the alignment between awareness, perception, and memory. And when that alignment slips, time itself becomes unstable, not in physics, but in experience. This does not mean time isn't real. It means your access to time is mediated, filtered, interpreted, and reconstructed. And chronostasis is a reminder that even when you are fully conscious, your brain is constantly editing reality to make it feel continuous. And when those edits become visible, they can feel strange, uncanny, even unsettling. Not because something is wrong, but because you are briefly seeing how the illusion is maintained. As we move forward in this video, we will widen this idea carefully, gently, without fear, without superstition, towards states where this synchronization slips more noticeably, where awareness remains present while the body or perception lags behind, where time feels distorted not for a fraction of a second but for longer stretches, and where the same principles that create chronostasis begin to operate on a larger scale. But for now, the key realization is simple and grounding. Time, as you experience it, is not a fixed stream. It is a construction, a narrative your brain maintains moment by moment, and chronostasis is the brain briefly revealing that narrative bartitsa. Editing room, not to frighten you, but to protect you, to keep reality smooth, continuous, and survivable. Nothing supernatural is happening here. Nothing is breaking. Your brain is simply doing what it has always done, quietly stitching time together so you can live inside it without noticing the seams.